Hello and welcome to another Squash demo, which today guides you through the reporting workspace. As a reminder, the reporting workspace can be accessed from the navigation bar on the left wherever you are in the application by clicking on this button, Reporting. First of all, we'll see that it's possible via this workspace to create graphs, to generate reports or dashboards, and create customized campaign exports to enable you to follow the design and execution phases of your tests. As a forward, I would like to remind you that the creation of graphs, reports, and dashboards from the reporting workspace is only possible for administrator, project manager, and tester referee profiles in Squash. On the other hand, all user profiles except for automated test writer are authorized to consult and/or export all these elements from Squash. For the purposes of this demo, I have a project with requirements related to my test cases. I also have a campaign with iterations, each of which includes executed tests, some of which are linked to anomalies. First, we'll demonstrate the creation of graphs with 6 graphs of different types and covering different objects. To create a graph, first select the project you want to add a graph and click the plus button here, Add a chart. The page of creation of a chart is divided into 3 parts. On the left, there is the selection of perimeter, the type of chart, the axes, and eventually the filters. In the center, the chart name can be changed here, and at the center, you have a chart preview, which will be automatically updated when you enter some data. And on the right, we have the Select the Attributes column. This column can be hidden by clicking on the double chevron on top right here and expanded like this. The first step is to select the perimeter of your chart. So we have 3 options. The first one is to select Current Project, which is the project from which you access this graphic creation page. The second option is Project Selection, which allows you to select one or more specific projects. And the third option, Custom Selection, allows you to refine your perimeter and make a selection based on the set of requirements, test cases, or campaign that may be contained in different projects. In this demo today, we will just each time select this project. And for this first graph, we are going to do something quite simple to create a distribution graph, which will show the status of the requirements. It's known also as pie charts, so we are by default on the good type of charts. Then for the axis, we have to select an attribute. In our case, we will be in the requirements entity and select the attribute's status. You'll notice right away that a preview appears in real time in the center of the screen, allowing you to check if the chart looks exactly as you hoped. To create a pie chart, we can see that by default, the tool has selected an aggregation type operation here. Aggregation are operations that allow us to group entities by their attribute values. So it's okay for this example. In our graph, this allows us to display the various possible status values. Here. Note the filters section at the bottom of the screen, which allows you to add filters if required, to clean up the data by selecting only the desired elements in the graph. We won't be adding any filter to begin. So to sum up, we have our project requirements divided by status with a legend here to help us. Now let's assume that, after all, we don't want to display the obsolete status on our graph, which only concern one requirement here, as indicated in brackets here, 1. So let's go to the filter section, click the plus button, select the status attribute, and click only the status you want to keep in your charts. So I select all the status except obsolete, and I see that in my chart there is no more the obsolete status. The filter section can also be used to focus on attributes that have not been selected in the axis. Here, for example, if we want to make a filter on the criticality of the requirements entity, we will see only the status that we want to have. So selecting the criticality and clicking only critical and major requirements, and we can see that the number of requirements in each part of the chart have been updated, as some of the requirements, minor or undefined, are not anymore in this graph. Once we are satisfied, we can name the graph. Here we'll call it major and critical requirements status. Then, to save it, simply click on Add, and you'll be taken to the graph consultation page where you can view the graph in the Reporting Workspace library here. In the information section here, at the bottom of the chart, you can consult the various criteria used to create the chart here. In particular, the perimeter, the axis, the attribute selected, requirement status, the operation selected, aggregate here, and then the filters, if any. Not forgetting that the date of the graph is here, and here there is the date of the last modification, if applicable. We are now going to create a second graph. This time it will be an histogram. So select Add Chart, select your project, and change the type of chart with the type of chart histogram. We see now that we need two different kinds of data. In our case, we want to have a chart which will show the number of anomalies per iteration. So we will need to select the attribute number of anomalies. This time I will do so with the select the attributes column. I click the magnifying glass with the minus to have only the entities. So the number of anomalies in my iteration, so I select the entity iteration, click the plus button, and select and drag and drop number of issues at the center of the preview chart. We see that the measure have been updated, and we now have a new data in this section. To differentiate the iteration within our graph, we then drag and drop the reference attributes here. So select and drag and drop. This time I will drag and drop it directly in the axis, and it will work. If the axes we've dragged and dropped are indeed the right ones, we need to check that the operations just below the axes, here and here, are the good ones. As we want to know the number of anomalies per iteration, we'll apply a sum operation, and not a count operation, to the number of anomalies axis, which will allow us to add up the number of anomalies. For the reference axis, we maintain the aggregates operation, which allows us to clearly distinguish each iteration of our project. For example, in our project, the iterations reference is 1, 2, and 3, and the graph shows that I have 3, 2, and 1 anomalies respectively in each of my iterations. We call this graph now and click on the Add button, and the chart is displayed here in the reporting library. We are now going to create a third graph to determine the number of executions performed on each browser. Once more, this will be an histogram type graph, but this time I will be created this graph from a custom field. In this case, we'll use a custom field that we've created based on the principle that we need to test a web application by alternating the execution of the test on different browsers. With this in mind, we don't want to run the same test on different browsers each time, but rather try to alternate the browsers on which we run our tests as much as possible. To this end, we've added a custom browser field linked to the executions entity, enabling us to select the browser from which we are going to run the test each time via a predefined drop-down list. The graph we'll create will show the number of executions per browser to see if the alternation has been respected. So we create a new chart, select our perimeter, select the histogram type of chart, and in this case, we'll measure the number of executions by selecting and dragging and dropping the execution ID into the executions entity here, directly in the measure axis. The count operation will count the number of executions, so it's the right operation for this kind of graph. Most of the time, the count operation will be associated with the IDs of any object, since in Squash, the ID is the only attribute that differentiates each object. For example, for test cases, requirements, and executions, the ID is really the only attributes that can be used to count them. The second axis here should then allow us to count the number of executions per browser. So I type browser here. In this case, my custom field is in French, so I type navigator and I drag and drop it here. There is also a small thing I wanted to tell you, which is that custom fields appear in the list here with a slightly different color, as the purple is very dark here. It's for Squash classic fields, and custom fields are a little bit lighter. This time we are going to select the aggregate operation, which will enable us to display the various browser values. We won't add any filter here, and the browser is selected for the axis 1 here, navigator, and for axis 2 we have the execution ID, and all these three browsers are displayed here. There is 17 test cases executed with Chrome, 16 with Firefox, and 13 with Internet Explorer. And we can see that we have also one test case which had been executed with no declared browser. Let's name the graph number of execution per browser. And click on the Add button. This graph we just made shows us that it's therefore possible to create graphs from custom fields, and I'd like to take this opportunity to add that the color of graphs created from list type custom fields, as this one, can be customized via the Entities section of the Administration Workspace accessible here. Now for the fourth graph, let's assume that as a project manager, we want to monitor the number of test cases created per day during the design phase. To do this, we have a type of graph that lends itself well to this type of indicator, the evolution type. So, add a chart, select my project, and select the evolution type. We want the number of test cases created per day, so we'll go through the test case entity. And as before, if we want to count the number of test cases, we'll select the test cases ID and apply a count operation, which is selected by default. Then we will then select created on here, which corresponds to the test case creation date. We'd like to create a graph of the number of test cases created per day, so we'll select the operation by day. By selecting this operation, we can see that we have other types of operation possible in relation to this kind of attribute, which is a date attributes. For other attributes, we don't have the same operation available. We therefore have an evolution type graph, which displays for each date the number of test cases which have been created each day. So October 8, we have 4 test cases, 2 more in the 9 October, and 3 more in the October 10th. Let's rename the graph. And add it in our reporting library. Another thing you can do once you have created a chart is to modify it by clicking on this button here. You access once more to the creation page that allows you to change anything you want about your selected chart. In our case, and to make my chart more readable, I'll add a filter to keep only some dates in my chart, because we can see that we have a lot of execution at the beginning of the chart, and after a lot of time without any execution until December 7, 2020. So I select the plus button in the filter, go in my test case, add entity, and select created on to select only date lower or equals as first November 2018, for instance. Click update, and my graph is very much more easy to understand now. Click modify to save it in your reporting library. We are now going to create a fifth graph. This time it will focus on the execution phase, where we'll track the number of tests executed per day and per tester. For this purpose, a trend graph is well suited, since it will contain 3 data and will therefore enable us to follow the evolution over time of the number of tests executed in a similar way to what we did for the creation of graphs by day, but this time with the addition of an extra data, namely the identity of the tester. So I create a new graph, select the trend type of chart, and I select the execution plan item, and to begin the execution plan item ID with the operation once more count for an ID. Then for the second axis, we'll select the attribute last executed on with the operation by day once more, and then the last attribute will be the tester login that will drag and drop in the series axis, selecting aggregate as the operation. We are not going to add any filter, so for information purposes in my projects, I have 3 different testers here, and they all have executed some tests each day, so we can see this really easily with this chart. We save this graph with name, and click add to add it in my library. And finally, the sixth graph and last graph is to have an overall view of campaigns test results, for example, and if we wish to compare results from one iteration to another. So, once more, select my project. In this case, we'll be able to create a comparison type of chart, the last one here, comparative type of chart, which will focus on the execution status contained in each iteration. So for each iteration, we can compare the different execution results. We'll start by trying to measure the number of execution plan items. To do so, we select the execution plan item ID here with the count operation once more. Then, unlike the other graphs, we cross-reference this data from another entity. So it will be the entity iterations here, and we will select the reference of each entity here with the aggregate operation to get the number of tests per iteration and per status. The comparative graph is also a graph with three datas. So we'll add the execution status here from the execution plan items as a series with the aggregate operation to get the number of tests per iteration and per status. So here is a preview. I have a comparison between my three iterations, 1, 2, and 3, and I have the number of each test case with any status. So we have two test cases blocked in my third iteration and one failure in my third iteration, etc. And in the same graph, we have also the overview of the number of test cases which have been executed for each iteration. So for this instance, I can see that in my first iteration, I had like almost 35 test cases executed. In the second one iteration, I had a little bit more than 15 test cases, and in the last one, only 11 or 12 test cases executed. We gave it a name. And save by clicking the Add button. That's it for the graph creation part. So now, after creating graphs, we also have the option of creating reports by selecting the plus button and clicking Add a report button. We arrive on a page with all the reports you can generate. These are divided according to the phase of the testing process to which they refer, as preparation phase or execution phase, and can be exported in various formats, but usually in a Word or PDF. And here we are going to create a test case report. Here, I select and I give it a name. In the information section, we also have the possibility to add a summary or a description of our test case report. And then we have another block which name is criteria, which allows us to select the perimeter of the report. This perimeter can vary according to the type of record selected. For test case report as this one, we have three options: to select the project perimeter, to select one or several nodes in the test case tree, or select a specific milestone. In this case, we will check the first option, and then we have several options with print options if necessary, as this kind of document can then be printed. At the bottom of the screen, we have three options: to cancel if we are not satisfied with this option, or to download it or add it in our reporting workspace. And this document appears once more in the reporting library. As with the graphs, we then have an information block here that reminds us the criteria we have chosen, and from this page and at any time, we have the option of downloading the report by clicking on the download button here, and we also have the option to modify it at any time. If the information contained in the project, particularly in terms of test cases or execution changes, the information will be automatically updated the next time it is downloaded. We are now going to talk about a rather special report, the campaign report, which you can only generate if you have a Squash commercial license by clicking this button here, campaign report. You have the same information block as the previous one, but in the block criteria, the options are really different, as you can see. And we will focus today on this specific option, which is include issue details, which allows you to include details of campaign or iterations anomaly. In this case, we are in the campaign report, but I have to mention that you can also generate an iteration report. So if you check this checkbox, you must know that it will work only if you have a Squash project which is associated with a bug tracker such as Jira, GitLab, or Redmine, but only these three types of bug trackers. So in this case, I will not create a new campaign report, but I wanted to show you an example here. We'll now present you the report, the campaign report that I have previously generated. And we have in this document, which is an editable document in Word, some elements that I show you now with a summary, first of all, automatically updated by Squash. And then you have a certain amount of information. Some will be pre-filled by Squash according to the information contained in your campaign or iteration. This is the case, for instance, for all the data which are marked in black. And for all the data displayed in yellow, it means that Squash has not encountered the information in Squash and that you'll have to complete it manually in Word if needed. You then have information about the volume of test cases executed or test results at the campaign and iteration level, which indicate you the test execution status for each perimeter. As indicated here, it's the indicator about the full campaign, and here is for each iteration. All this is quite similar to what you'll find in the default dashboard in Squash's campaign workspace. You also have the information about functional coverage of requirements according to their criticality with various indicators, and the same here by iteration. And then if you've chosen to display the anomaly report, the issue details on the box before I showed you before, you will have a chapter here with statistics on anomaly or bug, as explained here. And if you have different types of anomaly, you will have different types of table here, such as, for instance, bug table, and then evolution table if you have, for instance, issues with the type evolution. So here we have a two-entry table with on the one side the possible status of anomalies here, and on the other side their criticality with some statistics. At the bottom of this table, we have another table that detail you the list of anomalies declared in the iteration or in the campaign. Now it's a campaign report, so it's in the campaign, with their ID, their summary, their criticality, and their status. So it's a bit similar that what you can find in the known anomalies tab present in the various Squash workspaces. And then if you continue, the sixth chapter is the conclusion, where you can enter the decision, the final decision after your testing process, if it's a go or a no-go, etc. And after you have some appendix with some very detailed information that you can find. So let's go back in Squash. And after this campaign report, and once we have created graphs and reports, we have the option of adding them to custom dashboards. To create a custom dashboard, you have to select the plus button and add a dashboard, give it a name. This one appears in the library, and now we can simply drag and drop the charts from the library into this workspace to add it. So I want this one, and this one, for instance. I can rearrange each time I want to change the organization of my dashboard. I am also able to add a campaign report or any kind of report. And as I said, I can rearrange my dashboard to have a lot of information well displayed. I'm also able to delete each elements I want to delete to have a legible dashboard. And for instance, I add this one too to have a full dashboard, which can combine graphs, charts, and reports. And then we can exploit these dashboards in the various Squash workspaces, displaying them from the default dashboards. To do this, when we select the favorite button here, we select a kind of workspace. For instance, I select test cases here. And when I go in my test case workspace, I have a default dashboard here. And when I click favorite, my dashboard is automatically updated. But we can redisplay the default dashboard by clicking default. You can also see that if I vary the selection in the library here, my dashboard is automatically updated according to the test cases in each folder I select. And if I select multiple folders and clicking refresh, my data and my graphs are automatically updated also to the selection made in the library here. So I was saying that the data in the charts will adapt, but for the reports, as this one, you need to know that the perimeter will always be fixed and in line with what was done in the reporting workspace before when the report was created. It will not be automatically updated the perimeter in the dashboards in the workspaces. To conclude the overview of this reporting workspace, let's go back in it. Let's talk about personalized campaign export or iteration export by clicking the Add a Custom Export button here. Let's say we want to export all the execution steps included in our iteration 1, for instance. Let's start by giving it a name. Select perimeter. In this case, it's easy because I said it's iteration 1, confirm, and then select all the attributes you want to export, such as the ID of the campaign, the ID of the iteration, its reference, etc., etc. And when we are satisfied with the selection we have made, we click Add to add it in our library. In this case, I already have a custom export, which is in French, for instance, but the same is in English. And in the information block here, you can have the date of the creation of this export, this live modification, the perimeter of its export, if it concerns only the last executions, and the list of each attributes you have selected to have in your export. Then you can download it and it will open in a CSV file with the different attributes you wanted to gather in your documents, as the label of the IT, the list reference, the test case label, the test case references, etc. And you can customize it as you wish. Let's go back in Squash. And you can see that at any time you can modify this export and download it once more if you need. This is the end of our presentation of the reporting workspace functions. I hope we have been clear and complete, and thank you for your listening. See you soon for another Squash demo.